Welcome back to another instalment of New Zealand's Bird of the Week, where in this video I will be talking about the South Island kōkako, birds that have orange wattles instead of the blue of their North Island cousins, and currently remain mysterious as to their status of being alive or not. I hope you enjoy. South Island kōkako are overall mid-grey in colour, being quite similar to the related North Island kōkako, both being nested in the endemic New Zealand bird family Arcoleo, in also having a dark facial mask, short wings with similarly short glides, as well as having wattles, though they do differ in some ways. For one, said wattles are a bright orange instead of blue, and while being less notable, were described in life as being stronger flyers, which seems to be down to their proportionately longer wings, as well as being an overall dark shade of grey and being slightly smaller. South Island kōkako occurs in forests throughout the South Island, including Stewart Island and Stephens Island. Formerly widespread and common, they declined rapidly following the introduction of ship rats, stoats and other mammalian predators, and were very rare by the early 1900s. The last generally accepted sighting was in Mount Aspiring National Park in 1967, but unconfirmed sightings continue to be reported. When it came to their behaviour and breeding, birds reportedly began their courtship displays in October, with the males performing a display to given females, raising and spreading their wings and tails, as well as bowing their heads while making an apparent gurgling noise. Their songs overall are some of the slowest of any songbird species and are very beautiful in the organ-like sounds they produce. Their nests were large structures, made in thick scrub not too far off the ground, usually made of twigs and moss, in which they'd lay about 2 to 3 stone-coloured eggs with brown spots. Said eggs were then brooded for a good 18 days by the female during December and February, with the male bird feeding her during that period of time. It was noted in one record by Walter Buller in 1888 that the birds can sometimes be seen, quote, travelling through the bush on foot, sometimes as many as 20 of them in single file, passing rapidly over the ground by a succession of hops, and following their leader like a flock of sheep, for, if the first bird should have occasion to leap over a stone or fallen tree in the line of march, every bird in the procession follows suit accordingly. It was also recorded by Austrian taxidermist and also infamous Maori grave robber, Andreas Reichik, that the birds would swiftly come to their partner's aid to check on them in the case of their death, with him on one occasion shooting one bird and their mates then appearing next to them, hopping around and calling, evidently in a state of great agitation. The scene caused Reichik to spare the living bird, being filled with remorse at the time, and also showed some key behaviour of the South Island kōkako in the process when it came to their social links. When Europeans settled New Zealand, South Island kōkako was still plentiful, being found throughout the west coast from as far north as Nelson to all the way down to Fiordland and Stewart Island, also holding out in the more rugged areas on the east coast around Banks Peninsula and the Catlins, surviving there while much of their habitat around them was burned off by the Maori who lived there. Their plentifulness did not last though, as after the successive waves of introduction of cats, rats and stoats, they became very rare by the late 1800s, with the last accepted 20th century sighting coming from Mount Aspiring National Park in 1967. While this was occurring, North Island kōkako, that while they would decline heavily too later on, was still doing well, and this appears to be down to their differing behaviour. South Island kōkako apparently tended to spend longer periods of time feeding on the forest floor and nesting closer to the ground than their North Island counterparts, making them all the more accessible and vulnerable to introduced mammals. After this, and then having been seen in over 40 years, they were declared extinct in 2008, but that classification would change soon afterwards. In 2013, a 2007 sighting from Reefton by 2 people on the west coast was accepted as valid, which led to their conservation status moving from extinct to data deficient. Several other reports from around this time and afterwards have been considered as probable and likely too, so from this, it seems like the birds may indeed still be alive, just in highly reduced and critically low numbers. Because of all these sightings, the South Island kōkako Trust was formed in 2010, which set out to give itself 5 years to find definitive proof of their continued existence. Almost 12 years later, the Trust, in spite of the lack of said definitive evidence, continues to go strong, having a $10,000 reward up for grabs, which is up from the initial $5,000 to entice people to go out and find evidence of the bird's continued survival, noting continued reports. Some members who've continued the search for the bird themselves for up to over 40 years routinely set up camera traps, as well as now with new technology like eDNA studies to better monitor in the environments they could still be surviving in. Key areas to note are around the Heafy Track, which has sustained predator control, and also in areas like around the Milford Track, Cobby Valley, the Richmond Ranges and the Spur Track in Hamner Forest Park. To identify them, it's worth looking out for these 5 factors, with the main goal of getting either verifiable video or photographic evidence, that's in physical evidence like feathers, which could then be further tested for DNA. Behavioural evidence too, like finding large clumps of moss which are neatly clipped at their base without soil or litter attached, rather than being pulled or kicked, like what would be seen with weka and blackbirds, is another sign of kōkako activity, and that is definitely also something to look for in helping to narrow down potential areas where they could be surviving. Apparent kōkako calls have also been recorded, though confirming whether or not they're 100% kōkako or not is uncertain, but many of them do indeed sound very similar.
And now I can pick up kaka, but I heard that there's the call. That's the call.
The songs match the sharp clarity and flute-like notes they are known to exhibit, as well as more organ-like sounds, with these soft long notes being among the key ones to look for. Bizarre incidents have also plagued the search efforts, with an apparent recording by Dan McKinnon in 2000, who had apparently seen a pair of kōkako near his farm out the back of Charleston, whereby he recorded 24 seconds of full organ song on a high-quality recorder which he had borrowed, went up in flames after his house burned down, and all before a scheduled meeting he was going to conduct with the Department of Conservation, where he would have surprised him with the recording a few weeks later. Other instances of cameras getting lost on tramps have also occurred, so it's all the more imperative for not just South Island kōkako searchers, but also photographers and videographers, to keep their equipment secure and also charged. While doubts still exist, it remains imperative that people continue to look for them, given the unlikely success stories like the New Zealand storm petrel, orange-fronted parakeets, and the takahe, because who knows, perhaps even someone watching this video will be the one to document them. No matter how many there are, knowing that they still remain would allow for increased priority to be placed on protecting them and their environment, and that would be a win, not just for them, but for the whole rest of the country, so that we can continue to prioritise our environments in the manner it so rightly deserves. And with that, I thank you for watching this instalment of New Zealand's Bird of the Week. For next time, you're now able to vote for the white-faced heron, which are New Zealand's most common heron species, as well as being among the more numerous large birds here. With that, I'll see you next time, whenever that may be.